peripheral nervous system then. So we talked about the central nervous system made up of the brain and the spinal cord. We studied the brain, parts of the brain, their major functions, spinal cord, different sections of the spinal cord. Remember, the dorsal root carries sensory information. The ventral root carries motor, outgoing information. Now we're going to see that information out in the periphery, out where it connects to the organs. So the peripheral nervous system has the sensory, again, information coming in from the nerves, and motor information going out from the nerves. So when we send information out to an organ, it's either voluntary skeletal muscle, that's the somatic nervous system, and the autonomic nervous system, those neurons are going out to some involuntary organ, like smooth muscle of the digestive tract, or cardiac muscle of the heart, or glands of the endocrine system. So the autonomic nervous system is that involuntary part of the nervous system. So it's smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands, which makes up the autonomic nervous response. And the somatic response is, again, skeletal muscle under voluntary control. So we're going to talk about these two divisions and a little bit of details within those divisions. So when you talk about the incoming information of the peripheral nervous system, so this is nerves. Nerves are mixed. They have sensory information and motor information. It's like a two-way highway. All of our spinal nerves are mixed nerves. So we have different types of receptors out there at the end of those axons, right? We have the dendrites, the cell body on one side, and on the other side we have axon terminals that are going to send that impulse along. So the modified dendrites or receiving end of sensory receptors are classified by what type of information they respond to. So mechanoreceptors respond to touch and pressure. So when you poke or vibrate the skin, that stimulates mechanoreceptors. Thermoreceptors respond to heat. So when temperature is changing, that stimulates thermoreceptors. Photoreceptors respond to what? We find those in the retina. What do they respond to? Light, yeah. And chemoreceptors respond to some chemical binding. So we see those in our taste buds. Chemicals bind to receptors on the tongue, and that stimulates those taste buds. We also see that in the nasal cavity. Chemicals in the air we breathe gives us different smells, stimulates the sensory receptors found in the olfactory nerves. And then nociceptors, think of noxious, painful. These are pain receptors, And sometimes some of these receptors will accommodate or adjust to constant stimulation where you don't feel it anymore. But pain receptors don't adjust. We always need to feel pain. It's very important that we feel pain. So those don't adapt. So when we classify them, we can call them extero, intero, or proprioceptors. Exteroceptors are exposed to the outside surface of the body. So anything that's a stimulus coming from outside the body, those will activate exteroreceptors. So the special senses, taste, hearing, sight, touch, those are all exteroreceptors because there's something coming in from the environment that we need to be aware of. Interoreceptors are inside the body that maintain homeostasis. So interoreceptors would be receptors, say, in the carotid arteries running up your neck that are detecting blood pressure. And that determines if those carotid arteries need to constrict or dilate, or if the heart needs to increase its heart rate or decrease its heart rate. Depends on stretch receptors for pressure inside the body. So these are just detecting what's going on in the body. Do we need to adjust? And then proprioceptors are for body position. So just think they both start with a P, proprio and position. So we have little receptors deep in the belly of our muscles and attached, buried in our tendons at joints that tell us our body position. You can close your eyes and put your two fingertips pretty close to touching because of proprioceptors. Your brain is constantly giving inputs into body position and where your arms and legs are at. So those are proprioceptors. So if we look at a nerve then, the nerve has a sensory side and a motor side. So the nerves that they carry sensory information and motor information, and they divide as they get near the spinal cord. Remember, sensory information goes into the dorsal root, ventral motor information comes out the ventral root. So a nerve is a bundle of myelinated axons outside the brain and spinal cord. So remember that definition. A bundle of myelinated axons outside the brain and spinal cord. So they come off the spinal cord and they attach to organs out in the body. And we studied those in lab this week. So we have the different spinal nerves. We talked about the radial nerve, the femoral nerve, the sciatic nerve. Those are all myelinated axons leaving the spinal cord and stimulating an organ or a muscle. So when we look at the different types of nerves, we not only have those 31 pairs of spinal nerves, we also have nerves that come right off the brain. We studied one when we looked at the sheep brain, the optic nerve. Remember how that came in and crossed over and became the optic tract? So nerves that are out of the central nervous system we call nerves, myelinated axons, but as they become part of the central nervous system, we change the name of those myelinated axons to tracts. So a tract is a bundle of myelinated axons inside the central nervous system. Nerve is outside the central nervous system. So we have 12 pairs of cranial nerves. They come right off the brain. So they're not part of the brain because they extend off of it. They are part of the peripheral nervous system, cranial nerves. The optic nerve is one of those. So when you shine a light on someone's retina through their pupil, that causes the pupil to dilate. So you stimulate the optic nerve with the light, and then the motor nerve that controls the size of the iris is the oculomotor nerve, and that's what causes a change in the size of the pupil. So you're actually stimulating two different cranial nerves when you shine a light in someone's eye. A sensory nerve, which is the optic nerve, it's purely sensory, detects the light, sends it to the brain, and then the response, purely motor carrying nerve, is the oculomotor nerve, which will change the size of the pupil. So we'll pick up next time and talk about the reflex arc.